Shimano are to cycling what jam is to a scone.
Or crackers to cheese.
Or Bert to Ernie.
I mean, you just can't think of one without thinking of the other. And that is for good reason. Over the past few decades, Shimano-equipped bikes have, well, just had a huge impact on our cycling lives.
And as Shimano reach 100 years old, or celebrating their centenary, we're going to be taking a look at some of the iconic technologies and developments that we've probably forgotten about and have changed our cycling lives.
And there's been many innovations that Shimano has brought to us over those 100 years, but we're going to focus on 4 that we consider to be among the most important, starting with SIS, then moving through to Hyperglide, then to STI and DI2.
Or in plain English, we've got gears that click into place, we've got silky smooth gear shifts, we've got changing gear on your handlebars, and then DI2, which represents Shimano's pinnacle in engineering, which is electronic shifting.
Ooh, and better than that, we've actually managed to get our grubby little hands on a set of period-correct bikes with the exact vintage group sets on them. And I've dug out the GCN time machine, so we, well, you guessed it, the costume department's going to be busy today as well.
We've got a costume department?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. We've come to Suffolk, a county north of London, to visit a man who has one of the most impressive collections of retro bikes in the UK. Steve Grimwood of Elmy Cycles has been kind enough to build up these 4 beautiful bikes for us.
4 slices of cycling history that we're even allowed to ride. Over the next few weeks, we'll be taking a deeper look into each of these technologies over on the Tech channel. So make sure you head over there, subscribe and turn on notifications so that you can nerd out with us.
Well, what are we waiting for? Let's get stuck in. We're in 1984. Apple have just placed the Macintosh computer on sale. There's been the first untethered spacewalk, and Tetris has been officially released in the Soviet Union. And in Japan, Shimano have just made changing gear on our bikes a whole lot better. This is Shimano's first iteration of SIS shifting, SIS standing for Shimano Index System. And basically, if you've got a bike which features gears and there's Shimano, then you'll have SIS gears on your bike. And even if you don't have Shimano gears, well, you can thank the gods that Shimano invented SIS. Prior to this, changing gear required careful control and judgment from the rider to ensure they had the exact gear that they wanted. We didn't have the clicks that we're familiar and used to today, and changing gear was a slow process and something you certainly didn't want to do when you were tired or under pressure in a race situation. What indexing means is that the fine-tuning of your gears is no longer done by the rider when they're out on the road. It's now a job that's done in the workshop. The lever has got its distinctive click that we're all familiar with today, and that moves the derailleur the corresponding amount into the gear that you've selected. And in a typically modest fashion, Shimano kept the friction or non-index setting in their levers for a number of years. The bike I've been riding is this beautiful Gitan 531 from 1988. It features an incredibly small 7-speed cassette, well, certainly by today's standards, and a 52/39 tooth chainset. And it's from an era when spin to win wasn't really something pro riders did. Speaking of wins, this bike is from the year Shimano took its first ever Grand Tour victory in the Giro d'Italia, a race previously dominated by Italian group sets.
Imagine the scenario. It's the late 80s. The world is grappling with the fall of the Iron Curtain, the introduction of the World Wide Web, and Home and Away has just aired on Australian television. And while this is happening, Shimano quietly introduces Hyperglide to the world. Oh, and dressing like this was the height of fashion. When Hyperglide was first released, it didn't have anywhere as big a launch as Shimano SIS before it. And consequently, not everyone got the memo. There were actual sort of anecdotes from the time of disgruntled customers returning Hyperglide cassettes they'd bought from bike shops, complaining that they'd been sold a faulty one or a used one that was worn out, because they didn't realise that the uneven, sort of different shaped teeth weren't worn out. That was actually precision Japanese engineering, because prior to Hyperglide, cassettes consisted of a set number of sprockets with different numbers of teeth on each, but all the teeth were the identical shape. And the result of this was that when you went to change gear, it took a lot longer for the chain to engage on the next sprocket. It was a lot clunkier and a lot less reliable.
With Hyperglide, the individual sprockets on the cassette have become specially shaped with distinctive ramps and tooth profiles that allow the chain to effectively climb up and down the cassette. The chain can turn on the cassette while simultaneously being engaged on two different sprockets, allowing the cyclist to actually change gear under load. The result was smooth, crisp, reliable shifting. It's a design and engineering feature that's easily overlooked and very easy to take for granted, but it's an absolute work of genius. And I think, well, it deserves that you should take a look at your own cassette at home and just take a moment to appreciate it and have a closer look at it and observe all the little ramps and pitches on the sprockets, because it allows for faster shifting.
Once again, where Shimano led, others followed. And even though this beautiful Kirk Precision I'm riding has down tube shifters, the just increased precision and smoothness of these gear changes, it's just so noticeably better than the previous generation group set without Hyperglide that we were just riding. Oh, it's magic.
Wow, I've been teleported to 1990, an iconic year in cycling history. Firstly, well, it was the year that I was born, and secondly, we have this, the 711 team bike, Eddie Merckx. And what's so special about this? Well, they were the first team to use Shimano STI shifters. We have our off-road cousins to thank for the invention of the STI lever, an invention that was born from the culmination of years of research and development. Technology that in mountain biking is referred to as rapid fire shifting, a ratcheting mechanism that can increase or decrease the tension in the cable and as such move our rear derailleurs accordingly. And it was a number of years later that we saw this technology implemented onto our road bikes to enable Shimano to move the shifter from the down tube of our bikes up onto the handlebars, making for much easier shifting and greater control of the bike. And if anything, it's one of the biggest advancements in road bike technology that we've seen for a number of years. Sure, you could take your shifters and fix them onto the stem. You could even have shifters on the ends of your bars. I mean, some bikes still do that. But what Shimano did with their STI shifter was combine the brake lever and the shift lever in one controlled unit. So you didn't even have to take your hands off of the handlebars to change gear, meaning you could easily change gear down the drops in a sprint. You could eat whilst changing gear. You could even, something that many people take for granted, is change gear whilst riding out of the saddle. This particular model of bike has seen some action, having been ridden by Steve Bauer in the 1990 Tour de France, where he held the yellow jersey from stage 1 through to stage 9. Incidentally, it's the same year that he took second place in Paris-Roubaix. For me, one of the standout features of the STI lever is the ability to shift and brake at exactly the same time. Something that I do all the time when I'm out riding, and that I just can't imagine living without. And it seems a little bit crazy to think before the invention of the STI lever, it was something that no one could ever do. So next time you jump on your road bike, your gravel bike, or maybe even your cyclocross bike, spare a thought for the Shimano total integration system and the time that it saved you by not having to take your hands off of the bars to change gear. And also, think about the near misses and crashes that you've presumably avoided by being able to brake and change gear at the same time. All thanks to Shimano's total integration system. Fantastic.
Welcome to the future. Or at least that's what it felt like in 2009 when Digital Integrated Intelligence, DI2, was unleashed on the world. And it's bonkers to think that that was 12 years ago. I mean, I was still a student at the University of Manchester then. Oh, and yes, you'd be correct. This is a period-correct Cervelo S3 from the Cervelo test team, much like the one that would have been ridden by Thor Hushovd. Yeah, the kit though, that isn't Thor's. No, I borrowed that from Dan Lloyd. Just hope he washed it. Some would argue that anything that came out after the millennium can't be retro, but a lot has changed in the world since then. In 2009, well, Barack Obama was inaugurated, Michael Jackson died, Farmville and Avatar were released, and GCN hadn't even been invented. YouTube was only 4 years old. 2009 didn't bring about the world's first electronic shifting, but it did represent the first electronic shifting that was super reliable and superior in its shifting performance to the best mechanical group sets ever made. It wasn't long before every club ride became accompanied by the telltale R2-D2 like boop, boop, beep sound effects of a Di2 derailleur shifting gear. And from a user's perspective, the biggest differences between this and the Di2 we have today is that, well, it's now 11 speed, perhaps even soon to be 12 speed, and this is 10 speed, and the battery is external on this system. You can see it behind the water bottle, down there.
Hope you enjoyed taking a look at these 4 iconic shifting technologies. And if you want to see more about these bikes, well, we'll be taking a deeper dive and having a look at them in some upcoming videos. So consider subscribing to GCN Tech, and better yet, hit the bell icon to be notified as we release those videos.
Yeah, absolutely do, because there's so much more detail that we have to tell you about on these bikes and the Shimano tech on them that we just can't fit into this video. And as I look at these 4 incredible bikes and just how much the tech has evolved on them, I just can't help but think, you know, what's next? Like, what is going to be the future tech? You know, what are we going to be talking about? And most importantly of all, what are we going to be actually riding? All I do know, Alex, is I think it's going to be something that's beyond our wildest dreams.
Well, certainly that's a thought to end on, isn't it?